Discover the element that sparks all life. From the core of our DNA to the vast fields that feed our world, this is the glowing pulse of our living planet.
Imagine discovering the single most vital element for human survival, the
Yeah.
foundation of modern agriculture, and like the fuel for some of the most devastating weapons ever created.
Right.
Not in a pristine laboratory and not extracted from some glittering meteorite, but literally boiling at the bottom of a vat of human urine.
I mean, it sounds like a completely bizarre historical myth, but this is the actual origin story of modern chemistry.
It really is.
We are talking about the exact moment humanity kind of stepped out of the shadows of medieval alchemy and into empirical science.
Exactly. So for today's deep dive, our mission is to explore a source text called The Alchemist's Glow, the dual legacy of phosphorus.
Yes.
We're taking a look at the unbelievable story of element 15. This is a substance that feeds billions of people, powers every single living cell, and yet, contains such violent chemical energy that it's been used to burn entire cities to the ground.
The paradox of phosphorus is just, it's what makes it so compelling to study. I think by the end of this deep dive, you, the listener, will understand the actual physical mechanics of your own heartbeat in a completely new way.
Oh, absolutely. And you'll probably look at your next meal with a completely different perspective, too.
Definitely.
So we have to start in the year 1669. The source places us in Hamburg, Germany, in the laboratory of a guy named Hennig Brand.
Right. Hennig Brand.
And to understand what Brand was doing, you really have to understand the 17th century alchemical mindset. I mean, he wasn't doing science as we know it today.
Not at all. Brand was chasing the philosopher's stone.
Right.
The alchemists of this era, they operated on this belief that all matter was connected through these, mystical principles.
Right, like magic, basically.
Pretty much. They were looking for this legendary substance that could transmute base metals like lead into pure gold.
And Brand had this personal motivation, right?
Oh, yeah. He had recently married a wealthy widow, spent almost all of her fortune, and was desperately trying to manufacture this magical shortcut to endless wealth to, make up for it.
The fascinating part to me is the internal logic he used for the experiment. Because he didn't just pick urine at random.
No, she didn't.
The source points out that alchemists believed color was this fundamental signature of a material's true nature.
Right.
So, because urine has this golden yellow hue, Brand literally deduced that it must contain the hidden essence of actual gold.
It makes sense in a weird, twisted way.
Right, like if
Yeah.
he could just distill it down to its purest form, boom, he'd be rich.
But the lengths he went to are just staggering. I mean, Brand collected roughly 1,500 gallons of urine,
Which is just an absurd amount.
largely from local soldiers, apparently.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he just let it sit in his cellar for weeks until it putrefied.
Mm.
Then he boiled it down in this thick, pungent paste.
I can't even imagine the smell of 1,500 gallons of rotting, boiling urine in a 17th century basement.
In an enclosed space,
It must have been apocalyptic.
unimaginable, truly. But the chemistry happening inside that blistering glass retort he used was actually revolutionary.
Right, because of the heat.
Exactly. The extreme heat caused the carbon in the organic matter to react with the natural phosphates that are just present in human urine.
Okay.
This reaction physically stripped away the oxygen atoms, leaving behind a pure vaporized element that traveled down the neck of the vessel and condensed into a liquid as it hit cold water.
But he didn't get gold.
No gold.
What he got was this white, waxy substance that emitted this ghostly, cold green light in the dark.
Yeah.
Like it glowed continuously without a flame.
Which is insane to think about.
Right.
Yeah.
In 1669, observing a cold fire in a glass jar,
Yeah.
I mean, that would have felt like capturing a piece of a star.
Completely magical.
So he named it Phosphorus, which comes from the Greek meaning light bringer.
And this specific moment is widely considered the first time in human history that anyone intentionally isolated an element not known to the ancients.
Wow.
I mean, humanity had known about gold, iron, copper for millennia, right? But Brand was the first person to discover a brand new building block of the universe using a reproducible process.
It really is the ultimate task failed successfully scenario. Like,
Yeah.
you try to conjure magical gold out of bodily fluids, and you accidentally stumble upon the foundational cornerstone of scientific chemistry.
The profound irony of the whole thing is that Brand was completely unaware of why the phosphorus was in the urine to begin with.
Oh, right, because it was coming from him.
Exactly. He was boiling down the very element that was keeping him alive.
Yeah.
The biological machinery of his own body and the soldiers' bodies was just flushing out the excess of a chemical they literally couldn't survive without.
So let's follow that thread, because the transition from, like, a glowing party trick in a beaker to the actual biological engine of life is where the source material gets deeply technical.
It does.
Phosphorus isn't just floating around in our bodies doing nothing. It's highly structural.
Yeah, take DNA, for example.
Okay.
We often hear DNA described as a twisted ladder holding our genetic code, right?
Right, the double helix.
Exactly. The rungs of that ladder are the genetic letters, the A, C, T, and G. But the vertical rails holding those rungs together,
The sides of the ladder?
yeah, the physical scaffolding that prevents your genetic code from just falling apart into useless fragments, that is a sugar phosphate backbone.
Wow.
So without element 15, the structural integrity of DNA simply doesn't exist.
But the text pushes this even further with a molecule called ATP, or adenosine triphosphate.
Yes, ATP.
It refers to ATP as the energy currency of the cell. But I kind of want to dig into the actual mechanism here.
That's it.
Because calling it currency almost makes it sound passive, like coins sitting in a bank vault.
Oh, the mechanism is much more aggressive than a passive currency.
Okay.
ATP functions more like a microscopic spring-loaded trap.
A trap.
Yeah.
So the triphosphate part of the name means there's a tail of 3 phosphate groups attached to the molecule.
Oh.
And these phosphate groups are all highly negatively charged.
Okay, and negative charges repel each other.
Right.
So forcing 3 of them together in a chemical bond must require an immense amount of energy.
Exactly.
It's like taking 3 powerful industrial magnets, pointing their negative poles at each other, and trying to crush them together into a single tiny box.
That is the perfect analogy. The chemical bonds holding those 3 phosphates together are under massive volatile strain.
Wow.
So when your body needs to do work, whether that's firing a neuron to process the words you're hearing right now, or, contracting a muscle fiber in your heart, an enzyme comes along and snaps off that third highly unstable phosphate group.
Releasing all that built-up magnetic-like tension in an instant?
Yes, the physical kinetic energy released by breaking that specific chemical bond is what literally powers the biological action.
That's incredible.
And once the energy is spent, the ATP becomes ADP, adenosine diphosphate, meaning it only has 2 phosphates left.
So it's basically discharge.
Right. Your body then uses the energy from the food you eat to force a 3rd phosphate back onto the chain, resetting that spring-loaded trap.
Yeah.
You actually recycle your own body weight in ATP every single day.
Wait, really? Your entire body weight?
Every single day.
That is insane. But, okay, if the mechanism relies entirely on snapping off that 3rd phosphate, what happens when a living thing goes bankrupt? Like, if it runs completely out of phosphorus, does it just slowly wind down?
No, the biological machine instantly powers down. It's binary.
Or like flipping a switch?
Exactly. Muscles physically lose the kinetic mechanism to move. Brains lose the chemical ability to send electrical signals. Plants lose the machinery to process sunlight.
Everything just stops.
Everything. There's no alternative element that can step in to perform this exact high-energy spring-loaded function. Without phosphorus, complex life stops.
Which perfectly brings us to the macroscopic scale of the source material. Because if every microscopic cell needs this spring-loaded energy, that means every stalk of wheat, every ear of corn, and every living organism we rely on for food needs it too.
Right. And when human civilizations shifted from small-scale farming to massive agriculture, they collided with this fundamental chemical limit.
Right.
You can plant seeds in a field, but as those crops grow, they pull massive amounts of phosphorus out of the dirt to build their own DNA and ATP.
And when you harvest the crop and, take it to the city to be eaten, you're physically taking the phosphorus out of the field. It's gone.
Over time, the soil is utterly depleted,
Mm-hmm.
and the crops just stop growing.
Yeah.
For a long time, humanity struggled with this agricultural bottleneck. We tried cycling crops or returning manure to the fields to put the phosphorus back, but, it was barely enough to sustain the population.
We were bound by the natural, incredibly slow geological phosphorus cycle.
Until we discovered we could mine it.
Right. The source details how the discovery of phosphate-rich minerals fundamentally altered the trajectory of human civilization.
Teased everything.
Instead of relying on a slow natural cycle, we found massive deposits of fossilized phosphorus.
Initially, this came from Guano Islands.
Right, bird poop.
Exactly. Massive, ancient accumulations of bird and bat droppings that were rich in phosphates. Later, we discovered enormous geological deposits of phosphate rock, most notably in places like Morocco.
And we figured out how to dig it out of the ground, process it with sulfuric acid, and create artificial phosphate fertilizers.
Right.
We could suddenly just bypass the natural geological cycle entirely and inject element 15 directly into the soil on a massive industrial scale.
And the results were completely unprecedented.
Yeah.
The ability to artificially synthesize fertilizer allowed global crop production to just explode.
Right.
It is arguably the primary reason the human population was able to scale from, 1 billion people in the 19th century to over 8 billion today.
That's wild.
We are entirely dependent on these mined phosphate rocks to maintain our current agricultural output.
But the text presents this pretty sobering reality about mining it because the deposits of phosphate rock took millions of years of geological pressure to form, and we are extracting it at a rate exponentially faster than the Earth can replenish it. It's heavily implied in the source that we are essentially eating our way through a ticking biological clock.
This is exactly where we run into a crisis of thermodynamics and waste.
How so?
When we spread these artificial phosphate fertilizers onto vast agricultural fields, the crops only actually absorb a fraction of it.
Okay, wait, so where does the rest of it go?
Well, phosphorus is a heavy, solid element. It doesn't evaporate into the atmosphere like nitrogen does.
Right.
So when it rains, the excess phosphorus dissolves and just washes away into the local watershed.
Oh.
It flows into streams, rivers, and eventually the oceans.
Okay, I want to push on that for a second. If the phosphorus is just washing into the oceans, it hasn't left the planet. True, it's still here. So why does the source frame this as a catastrophic scarcity issue?
Because it becomes far too dilute to be useful. Gathering scattered phosphorus atoms out of the open ocean takes vastly more energy than mining it from a concentrated rock deposit. We are basically taking a dense, finite resource and permanently scattering it.
That makes sense.
And furthermore, that runoff causes severe immediate damage to the environment.
Right, eutrophication, the algae blooms.
Exactly. What happens in the fields happens in the water. The phosphorus feeds aquatic algae, causing these massive population explosions.
Because the algae want the ATP just as much as the corn does.
Precisely. So the algae coats the surface of the water, blocking out sunlight, and when that massive algae bloom eventually dies, the bacteria that decompose it consume all the dissolved oxygen in the water.
Creating those massive underwater dead zones where absolutely nothing can survive.
Yes. We are essentially washing our agricultural security into the sea, destroying aquatic ecosystems in the process, and running down the clock on the concentrated rock deposits we have left.
It's really grim. And finding a way to sustainably recycle phosphorus, perhaps by capturing it from our own wastewater before it reaches the ocean, is becoming one of the most critical engineering challenges for future food security.
Absolutely. Because we cannot manufacture phosphorus in a lab. We can only manage what we already have.
Right. Now, the narrative of element 15 up to this point has been heavily anchored in life, from glowing urine to ATP to feeding the world.
Right.
But the source material pivots sharply here to the dark side of this chemical tension.
It really does.
Because the exact same explosive property that makes ATP such a powerful biological battery makes pure phosphorus incredibly volatile.
We have to look at the physical structure of the white phosphorus Hennig brand discovered. The P4 molecule consists of 4 phosphorus atoms arranged in a tetrahedron.
Basically a three-sided pyramid.
Right. And from a chemical perspective, that shape is highly unnatural.
Because the angles are too tight.
Exactly.
Oh.
The atoms are forced into these tight 60-degree angles. Chemical bonds hate being bent that tightly. So the entire molecule is under massive structural strain, desperately trying to burst apart and form more stable bonds. The moment a P4 molecule comes into contact with normal oxygen in the open air, the oxygen aggressively snaps those strained bonds.
Resulting in spontaneous combustion.
Yes. It doesn't even need a spark or an ignition source. Just touching the air causes white phosphorus to ignite, burning with this brilliant, intense flame.
And historically, humanity quickly realized the power of this volatility. I mean, the source notes it was the active ingredient in the first friction matches, bringing portable fire to the masses.
Right. Before the invention of red phosphorus, which is a much more stable, non-spontaneous form of the element we use in matches today, white phosphorus was the dangerous standard.
But scaling up that spontaneous extreme heat leads to something much darker. The source details how militaries eventually weaponized this exact chemical mechanism.
Yes. White phosphorus produces a uniquely dense, opaque smoke when it burns, which makes it highly effective for military smoke screens to mask troop movements. However, because it burns at thousands of degrees and ignites spontaneously in oxygen, it was also deployed in incendiary munitions.
And the text is very clinical about the physical reality of these weapons. When white phosphorus munitions explode, they scatter burning chemical fragments.
Yeah.
Because it only needs oxygen to burn, it is notoriously difficult to extinguish once it catches onto surfaces or human tissue. It burns deeply, causing horrific, catastrophic injuries.
And the sheer severity of those injuries has led to deep controversies surrounding its use. Under international humanitarian law, the deployment of white phosphorus is heavily regulated.
Right.
Using it as a smoke screen or to illuminate a battlefield is generally permitted under law, but deploying it as an incendiary weapon in civilian areas is strictly prohibited.
It's just a jarring juxtaposition.
It really is.
The identical chemical tension that allows a mother's heart to beat or a field of wheat to grow can be dropped from the sky to incinerate a city. It really highlights the absolute neutrality of chemistry. The tetrahedral structure of the P4 molecule doesn't have a moral compass.
No.
The universe doesn't care how the energy is released. How humanity chooses to wield the tool is what dictates the legacy.
Phosphorus basically acts as a mirror for human civilization. It is the life giver, the agricultural savior, and the destroyer, all dictated by how we manage its volatile atomic structure.
Wow. We've covered a vast timeline today. We started in a foul-smelling 17th century basement with Henning brands searching for magical gold.
Right.
We unraveled the spring-loaded trap of ATP powering every living cell. We scaled up to the global fertilizer industry, currently keeping 8 billion people alive.
Yeah.
And we reckoned with the devastating incendiary weapons born from the exact same chemical energy.
A single element dictating the terms of our biology, our civilization's growth, and our capacity for destruction.
Before we wrap up, let's look back at the idea of scarcity we unpacked earlier. Knowing what we know now about the ticking biological clock of our agricultural system, here's a thought for you to chew on. What happens to human innovation and societal priorities when we truly realize that the most ordinary, seemingly invisible building blocks of our daily lives are actually finite, precious treasures?
Right.
What does the world look like when we have to start globally rationing the literal chemical spark of life?
It forces us to ask whether our technological wisdom has caught up to our chemical capabilities. We have the tools. The question is whether we can sustain them.
The alchemists spent their lives searching for gold, entirely missing the fact that the fragile, glowing element they stumbled upon was actually far more valuable.
Truly.
Next time on the Atomic 118 Deep Dive series, we invite you to join us as we explore the fascinating story of element 16, sulfur.
Ah, yes.
It's an element famous for its smell, but it's deeply responsible for changing civilizations in a completely different way.
Every element has a story, and there are still so many left to uncover.
Until next time, take a deep breath, feel that heartbeat, and take a moment to appreciate the glowing atomic machinery keeping you moving.